Hello and welcome to this yet another brand new episode on One India. Today we are discussing the international scenario that is developing vis-a-vis the war between India and between Russia and Ukraine, and how India is navigating its path as far as the fertilizer dependence and the fertilizer subsidies are concerned. To discuss that further, it's my pleasure to be joined by Vlada Galan, international political strategist and president and chairman of the board of International Ukrainian Crisis Fund and partner at Oracle International. Vlada, welcome to One India.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Vlada. Vlada, first things first. Today we are meeting to understand that as an international political strategist, how do you assess India's approach of using massive fertilizer subsidies to shield its farmers from the global price shocks? What potential long-term impacts do you foresee from this strategy on India?
Well, you're just in general, India has always continued to be a large consumer when it comes to fertilizers. And it's the third largest fertilizer buyer. Now with what has happened with the conflict in Ukraine and the abrupt withdrawal of Russia and Ukraine from food markets, coupled with the Black Sea region, what's happening in the Black Sea region, the blockade, which is actually a region I'm originally from. It's significantly impacted global food security. So this naturally has a serious effect internationally, and fertilizer will play a large part in that. This has had a massive rocket impact on when it comes to prices of things like fertilizer. And the average Indian farmer has certainly felt that. And India has realized that it needs to kind of ramp up internal production and really cannot continue to depend internationally on these high imports. And so that has had a huge impact when it comes to the Indian farmer. It's affected costs greatly. So the consumption of conventional urea has generally gone down in India now, and sales of locally produced nano urea have really increased. So it's made a massive impact on the Indian farmer when it comes to pricing. This new scheme that the government has put into place, where 50% of the fertilizer subsidies, are given back in grant form, which can go to other projects. I mean, some of these steps that have been taken have a massive impact on costs for the average farmer, and create a huge impact when it comes to them. It certainly helps to keep those costs at bay and does make a difference for the production of the average farmer.
Indeed, Vlada, indeed, you are right when you mention about India's steps that have been taken for self-reliance there. But India has increased its imports of Russian and Ukrainian fertilizers alike, despite geopolitical tensions. How do you view this diplomatic balancing act, and what implications might it have for India's international relations?
Well, India in general has actually, urea imports specifically have fallen. I think the figure was almost 1 million between last year. But, it's undeniable that India has depended on Russian fertilizer for years. That's undeniable. But I think a lot of the impacts and efforts that Prime Minister Modi has made to really ramp up things like the nano urea, that's going to make a huge difference in the long run. But it's undeniable that India depends on Russia, for many things. I mean, when it comes to oil, when it comes to fertilizer, sure. But it's really interesting to note that also is what gives India an interesting sense of leverage when it comes to Russia, because they are such a large importer of certain Russian products. And that is why India has such a geopolitical importance, because when they come to the table, they are seen as the trusted broker between the two countries when it comes even at looking at a potential kind of further dialogue.
Absolutely, Vlada. And one final aspect that I wanted to touch upon is very close to India, very close to any country which is bearing the brunt of a broken supply chain. The Modi government has had to make trade-offs between fertilizer subsidies and other developmental areas. like job creation and social welfare programs, because the money that was being used to buy commodities from these war-torn countries, ultimately India had to pay it from its pocket, maybe compromising other aspects of development. In your opinion, how might this impact India's overall economic growth and social development in the coming years from a third person point of view?
Well, the government's strategy to reduce kind of imports in general, that two-pronged approach of increasing production of urea domestically and enhancing usage of nano urea has certainly been interesting. But this, I think it's the Pranam scheme, this scheme of the subsidies that are saved by the state 50% and given back as a grant. Some of this is actually can be used to build infrastructure, and I think this strong push to put a focus on producing, urea locally, nano urea, actually can certainly help in job creation. But everything is a trade-off. If, of course, there are things that will be an economic hit in for a short period of time, but the long-run implications of some of these schemes actually can be quite beneficial. But the devil is in the details and in the execution. It's very important to understand how this is actually going to be executed over time. And that's what's going to be very interesting to watch. If some of those subsidies that are, saved by the state, given back as a grant, actually do go into infrastructure, or they don't and end up disappearing in various, other budget details. So that's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on. And I think the Indian people have a job to keep the Prime Minister accountable when it comes to this, and the party accountable when it comes to this, to make sure that in the long run, these things actually do end up helping infrastructure and jobs.
So there you heard it from Vlada Galan, international political strategist and president and chairman of the board of International Ukrainian Crisis Fund and partnered at Oracle International. Thank you, Vlada, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.